All right, you sick fucks. Today, we're going balls deep into Beijing.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
talking about the heart of the freaking Middle Kingdom.
Okay.
A city that's seen more shit than your grandma's toilet. We've got a mountain of intel here, so let's cut the crap and dive in.
Sounds good to me. Let's get into it.
First things first, Beijing isn't just some commie shithole, right?
Yeah, no.
This place has a history that goes back further than your last hangover.
Uh-huh.
It's seen empires rise and fall,
Mm.
emperors get off their ass, and even had more name changes than a goddamn stripper with daddy issues. So fill us in. What's the deal with all these different names?
Well, you're right. The city's names are like a history lesson on China's power struggles.
Okay.
You mentioned Peking.
Yeah.
You'll still see that name pop up for some landmarks like Peking University. Even the Beijing Capital International Airport uses the code PEK.
Yeah, that always fucks with me. But it makes sense when you think about it, right?
Like,
Beijing means northern capital. Like, they had to make it clear this was the main event, not some second-rate shithole down south.
exactly. The Ming Dynasty chose Beijing to separate it from Nanjing, the southern capital. It was a big fuck you to anyone who thought they were in charge.
So basically, they were like, we're running this shit now, bitches, but hold on. Wasn't there a time when Beijing wasn't the big swinging dick? I vaguely remember something about it getting burned to the ground and rebuilt.
Yeah, Beijing's had its share of ups and downs.
Right.
It wasn't always the center of the universe. For example, during the Yuan dynasty,
Okay.
Kublai Khan, that badass Mongol emperor, decided to build a new capital called Dadu, northeast of the old city's ruins.
Wow.
This move actually helped put Beijing on the map. Before that, it was basically a backwater shithole.
Damn, talk about a glow up.
Mhm.
So how did this city, which was once basically a pile of ashes, turn into this mega city with like 20 million people? I can't even fathom that many people in one place.
Right.
That's more people than some countries, right?
It's mind-blowing, isn't it, as of 2021? Beijing had a population of over 21 million people. That's not even counting all the foreigners and tourists constantly swarming the place.
Holy shit, that's a lot of mouths to feed.
It is.
Speaking of which, I bet the food scene in Beijing is insane.
Oh, yeah,
With that many people, there's got to be a restaurant for every goddamn craving imaginable.
for sure.
But before we get to the good stuff, let's talk about the people. What's the breakdown? Is it all just a sea of Chinese faces?
Well, you're right that most of Beijing is Han Chinese. We're talking like 96%. But there's
Okay.
also a surprising amount of diversity.
Okay.
The biggest groups are Manchu Hui, Korean Mongol, and Tujia.
Wow.
And get this, there are roughly 200,000 foreigners living in Beijing at any given time.
Yeah, so it's not just tourists clogging up the Great Wall, huh?
Nope.
All right, so we've got a city with a history longer than a goddamn CVS receipt, a population that could fill a small country, and probably some killer food.
Right.
But let's get to the real shit money. I heard Beijing is an economic powerhouse. Isn't it like swimming in Fortune 500 companies and billionaires?
You're not wrong. Beijing is a serious player in the global economy.
Okay.
In fact, it has more Fortune Global 500 company headquarters than any other city in the world. We're talking a whopping 54 companies as of August 2022.
54? Holy shit, that's insane.
It is.
What kind of companies are we talking about here? Is it all tech giants and banks or what?
You've got your fair share of those, sure, but Beijing's economy is actually dominated by the service sector,
Okay.
which makes sense considering it's a global hub for everything from finance and business to research and media.
Yeah.
Think consulting firms, real estate tourism, the whole nine yards.
So basically, if you want to make bank,
Yeah.
Beijing is the place to be.
Pretty much.
But let's be real for a second. All this economic growth has got to come with a price, right?
Sure does.
What about the legendary Beijing smog? Is it still as bad as everyone says? Can you even see the fucking sky there?
The smog. It's been a major pain in the ass for Beijing.
Right.
But the city has actually made some serious moves to fight pollution, especially leading up to the 2008 Summer Olympics. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. The Olympics, didn't they spend a shitload of money trying to clean up the air for that? Like shutting down factories and banning cars and all that jazz?
They went all out. China dropped a mind-blowing $17 billion to clear the air for the Olympics.
Previously.
They implemented all sorts of crazy measures.
Like what?
Halting construction, kicking factories out of the city, and even restricting cars based on license plate numbers.
Wait, so if your license plate ended in an odd number you couldn't drive on certain days, that's some next level shit.
Yeah, it was pretty drastic. They also made buses and subways cheaper to encourage public transportation and even opened new subway lines to reduce traffic jams.
Damn. They really pulled out all the stops.
Yeah.
Did it actually work, though? Did the air quality actually get better?
Believe it or not, it did during the
Uh-huh.
Olympics. Beijing experienced something they called APEC blue.
APEC glue.
It was this period where the air quality dramatically improved. It was so noticeable that people were actually taking pictures of the blue sky, which was a rare sight back then.
That's wild. So they could basically flip a switch and clean up the air if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But I bet the smog came back with a vengeance as soon as the Olympics were over, right?
Sadly, yeah, the APEC blue phenomenon was short-lived. They pulled the same stunt for the 2015 China Victory Day parade, which they called Parade Blue.
Oh, wow.
But as soon as the party was over, the pollution levels shot right back up.
Ugh, that's depressing. So basically, Beijing is this economic powerhouse with a pollution problem it can't seem to shake. But let's move on to something a little more fun. What about the nightlife with all those young professionals and expats running around? I bet Beijing has a pretty wild side.
You bet your ass it does. Beijing's nightlife scene has exploded in recent years.
Oh, nice.
Areas like Huhai Sanlitun and Wudaku are packed with bars, clubs, and live music venues. There's something for every taste, whether you're into swanky cocktails or down and dirty dive bars.
Sounds like my kind of town. Okay, so we've got history, demographics, economics, pollution, and now nightlife. What's left? Oh, yeah, architecture. I've seen pictures of Beijing, and it looks like a goddamn architectural clusterfuck. You've got ancient temples, massive palaces, and then these crazy modern skyscrapers. It's like a time warp on crack.
You ain't kidding. Beijing's architecture is a wild mix of old and new.
Yeah.
You've got the traditional imperial grandeur of the Forbidden City and the Temple of Heaven. You know, those are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, right?
Of course they are. Those places are legendary. But what about the more modern stuff?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about those crazy buildings in the CBD, the ones that look like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, you can't miss those.
Yeah.
That's the Sino-Soft style, which is basically a bunch of boxy buildings from the mid-20th century. And then you've got the sleek modern designs of the Beijing CBD with buildings like the new CCTV headquarters.
Right.
It's a real clash of styles, but somehow it works.
It's like they're trying to cram every architectural style known to man into one city, and somehow they're pulling it off. Speaking of architectural marvels, what about the Bird's Nest? That thing is fucking iconic.
Right, the National Stadium, aka the Bird's Nest, is a masterpiece of modern architecture.
Yeah.
It's a must-see for any visitor to Beijing.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about Beijing's crazy history, its insane population, its economic boom, its smog problem, its wild nightlife, and its architectural clusterfuck.
Uh-huh.
What else is there to know about this place? Is there anything we've missed?
Plenty we could delve into the city's culture, its religious sites, its educational institutions.
Hold your horses. I set up for one episode. Don't you think we don't want to overload our listeners' brains with too much information?
Huh? Okay.
Let's save some of that juicy stuff for part 2.
You got it. We've already given them plenty to chew on.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface of this city. Beijing is like an onion, layers upon layers of history, culture, and just plain weirdness. And we're just getting started. So stay tuned, you magnificent bastards, because we'll be back with more Beijing madness in part 2.
Looking forward to it.
We'll be diving deeper into the city's culture, its religious scene, and maybe even some of its darker secrets. You won't want to miss it.
Sounds good.
Me too. Now go grab a beer and get ready for round 2.
All right, cheers.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Beijing, you adventurous bastards.
That's right. We're back for more punishment. Beijing style.
Yeah.
Last time we left off talking about Beijing's architectural clusterfuck.
From ancient temples to futuristic skyscrapers, you were quite right. It really is like they threw every architectural style into a blender and hit fuck it.
Damn right.
Yeah.
But today we're going deeper, man. We're talking about the shit that makes Beijing tick. The culture, the people, the soul of this crazy-ass city. What makes these people tick anyway?
That's what we're here to find out.
All right, so let's start with language. I know they speak Mandarin in China.
Right. But isn't there like a specific Beijing dialect? Do they have their own slang and everything?
You bet they do. The Beijing dialect is actually what Putonghua,
Putong.
the standard Mandarin spoken in mainland China and Taiwan, is based on.
Okay.
But the Beijing dialect is its own beast. It's got its own slang, pronunciation, and even grammar.
So if I went to Beijing and tried to speak my textbook Mandarin, would people even understand me, or would they just think I was a total dipshit?
They'd probably get the gist of what you're saying, but you'd stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
The Beijing dialect is full of colloquialisms and slang that you won't find in any textbook.
Man, that's wild. It's like even within one country, the language could be so different. Okay, so we've got the language down. What about the arts? I've heard of Peking opera.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that's unique to Beijing?
Peking opera is definitely a big one.
Right.
It's considered one of the highest forms of Chinese art, and it's been performed in Beijing for centuries. It's a crazy mix of singing, dancing, acrobatics, and costumes that would make Lady Gaga blush.
It sounds like a total trip.
Oh, yeah.
But what about something a little more modern? Like, is there a Beijing rock scene or anything?
Yeah, the younger generation is definitely into modern music and art.
Yeah.
Beijing has a thriving underground music scene with everything from punk rock to electronic music, and there are tons of art galleries and studios showcasing contemporary art.
Damn, so Beijing isn't just stuck in the past. It's actually got a pretty cutting-edge art scene, too.
Absolutely. It's a city that constantly pushes the boundaries of creativity.
Okay, so we've covered language and art.
Yeah.
What about the people themselves? What are Beijingers like? Are they all workaholic robots obsessed with making money?
Well, Beijing attracts people from all walks of life, so it's hard to generalize, but I'd say Beijingers are known for being straight-talking, down-to-earth, and resilient.
Resilient. What do you mean by that?
I mean, they've seen it all, you know?
Yeah.
This city has been through so much upheaval and change over the centuries. Beijingers have learned to adapt and bounce back from anything. They're like cockroaches. They'll survive a nuclear apocalypse.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They don't call it the Northern Capital for nothing.
Right.
So they're tough cookies.
Yeah.
But are they friendly? Like if I went to Beijing, would people be welcoming or would they tell me to fuck off?
Beijingers can be a bit rough around the edges, but they're actually quite hospitable. They value honesty and directness, so don't be afraid to speak your mind.
Got it. No bullshitting allowed. Okay, so we've got a pretty good picture of the people. What about their beliefs? I know China is officially communist, but is religion a big deal in Beijing?
It's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. China is officially atheist, but religion is making a bit of a comeback in Beijing.
A comeback? Didn't the communists try to wipe out religion like a bad case of herpes?
They did, especially during the Cultural Revolution, but in recent years there's been a growing interest in traditional religions like Buddhism and Taoism.
Okay.
You'll find temples all over the city, and they're often packed with worshipers.
So it's like a spiritual awakening. People are turning back to the old ways.
It's kind of like that. I think people are searching for something beyond the material world. They want to connect with something deeper, something more meaningful.
Damn, that's deep, man. But what about Christianity? Are there any Christians in Beijing?
There's a Christian community in Beijing, though it's relatively small. You'll find a number of churches, including the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, which is the oldest Catholic church in the city.
Huh. Interesting. I didn't realize Christianity had been in Beijing for that long.
Yeah, it goes back centuries. And there's also a small Muslim community in Beijing with a history spanning over 1,000 years. The Nuji Mosque is the oldest mosque in the city.
So even though China is officially atheist, there's actually a pretty diverse religious landscape in Beijing. It's like a goddamn religious buffet. Okay, so we've talked about the people, the culture, the religion. What about education? I've heard Beijing has some top-notch universities. Is that true?
Absolutely. Beijing is a major hub for higher education in China. It's home to some of the most prestigious universities in the country, even in the world.
Give me some names, man. What are the big ones?
Well, the two most famous are Peking University and Tsinghua University. They're both consistently ranked among the top universities in Asia, and even globally, they're like the Harvard and Yale of China.
Wow. So if you want a world-class education, Beijing is the place to be.
For sure. And it's not just those two. Beijing has over 90 public colleges and universities covering everything from medicine and engineering to the arts.
Damn, so Beijing is like a brain factory, churning out highly educated graduates left and right. But what about the cost of education? Is it super expensive to study in Beijing?
It depends. Public universities are generally more affordable than private ones. But even then, the cost of living in Beijing can be pretty steep, especially for foreign students.
Makes sense. It's a global city after all. Okay, so we've got education covered. What else is there to know about Beijing's culture? Is there anything we've missed?
Well, we could talk about the food.
Oh, yeah, the food. I knew we were forgetting something important. Let's dig into that. What are some must-try dishes in Beijing? I'm assuming Peking duck is at the top of the list.
You can't go wrong with Peking duck. It's basically a roasted duck served with thin pancakes, spring onions, and a sweet bean sauce. It's delicious, but be warned, it can be a bit messy to eat.
Sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
I'm up for it. What else is there? Is that all duck and dumplings?
There's way more to Beijing cuisine than just duck and dumplings.
Yeah.
You've got jiaozi, which are steamed dumplings filled with meat or vegetables. And then there's fuling jiabing, which is like a pancake filled with the medicinal fungus. It's a bit of an acquired taste.
Medicinal fungus.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. I guess I'll have to try it to see if I like it. Okay. So we've got the food covered. Is there anything else we should know about Beijing's culture before we move on?
We could talk about the tea houses.
Tea houses. What's so special about tea houses in Beijing? Don't they just serve tea?
Tea houses are like social hubs in Beijing.
Right.
They're places where people go to relax, chat with friends, and of course drink tea. But they're also places where you can really experience traditional Chinese culture. Some tea houses even have live music and performances.
So it's like a cultural immersion experience.
Exactly. You can sit back, sip some tea, and watch traditional Chinese opera performance. It's a great way to escape the hustle and bustle of the city.
Sounds pretty chill. Okay, so we've got tea houses, art, religion, education. Is there anything else we need to cover before we wrap up this deep dive into Beijing's culture?
Well, we could talk about the city's parks and gardens.
Parks and gardens in a city of 20 million people. Where the hell do they find space for parks?
Beijing might be a megacity, but it actually has a surprising amount of green space. There are parks all over the city offering a welcome escape from the concrete jungle.
All right, give me some examples. What are some of the best parks in Beijing?
Well, there's the Summer Palace, which is a massive imperial garden complex located on the outskirts of the city. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and definitely worth a visit.
Of course, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Everything in Beijing seems to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
It's a city with a rich history and culture, what can I say? But the Summer Palace is truly special. It's got beautiful gardens, lakes, temples, and even a marble boat.
A marble boat? What the hell's a marble boat?
It's a giant boat made entirely of marble. It was built by one of the king emperors and was used for parties and banquets on the lake.
Damn, those emperors knew how to party. Okay, so we've got the Summer Palace. What other parks are worth checking out?
There's Beihai Park, which is right in the heart of the city. It's got a beautiful lake, an island with a white pagoda, and even a former imperial palace.
Another imperial palace. How many of these damn palaces did they build?
The emperors had a lot of money and free time, I guess, but Beihai Park is a great place to escape the crowds and just chill. It's also a popular spot for boating and picnicking.
All right, so we've got the Summer Palace and Beihai Park. What else?
There's the Temple of Heaven Park, which is home to the famous Temple of Heaven. It's a huge park with beautiful gardens, ancient trees, and a serene atmosphere. It's a great place for a morning stroll or a Tai Chi session.
Tai Chi, you mean that slow-motion kung fu stuff?
Yep, that's the one. It's a popular form of exercise in Beijing, and you'll often see groups of people practicing Tai Chi in the parks early in the morning.
Huh. Interesting. So even in a bustling metropolis like Beijing, people still find time for traditional activities. They're not all glued to their phones, huh?
Not at all. It's a city that values its history and traditions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
We've talked about Beijing's unique dialect, its thriving art scene, its resilient people, its diverse religious landscape, its world-class universities, its delicious food, its relaxing tea houses, and its beautiful parks. Starting to think this Beijing place isn't so bad after all.
That's a fascinating city, that's for sure. There's always something new to discover.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet. We've got to explore the darker side of Beijing, the stuff they don't put in the tourist brochures.
You're right. Let's get down and dirty, shall we? All right, you twisted fucks. Welcome back to the final round of our Beijing beatdown. Last time we explored the cultural side of Beijing.
Right.
The food, the temples, those weird-ass marble boats the emperors built. Now it's time to get our hands dirty.
Sounds good to me.
I'm talking about the stuff they don't put in the tourist brochures. The hidden stories. The underbelly of Beijing. Let's be real. No city is perfect. Every city has its skeletons in the closet, so spill the tea. What's the real dirt on Beijing? Well, there's plenty to talk about. Where do you want to start? Let's start with the obvious one, the air pollution. We talked about APEC blue and all that, but what's the real story? How bad is the air in Beijing these days? Do people actually walk around with gas masks? I'm picturing some post-apocalyptic shit.
The air quality in Beijing has actually improved a lot in recent years. The government's finally taking environmental regulations seriously. They've shut down a lot of polluting factories and are pushing for cleaner energy sources.
So they're actually trying to fix this shit, not just slapping a Band-Aid on it for some big event.
It seems like a more sustained effort this time. The data shows that the levels of particulate matter and other pollutants in the air have been steadily dropping.
Damn, that's actually good news. Maybe I can leave the gas mask at home after all, but I bet there are still some days where it's like breathing in a dumpster fire, right?
There are still some bad air days, especially during the winter months.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like it used to be. You won't see people walking around with gas masks anymore.
That's a relief. Okay, so the air pollution's getting better. What about crime? Is Beijing a safe city? Can I walk around at night without getting mugged?
Beijing is actually considered a very safe city, especially for its size. Violent crime is rare, and the streets are well patrolled by the police.
So I can leave my bulletproof vest at home then?
Definitely, but it's always smart to be aware of your surroundings and take common sense precautions like you would in any big city.
Right, right. Don't act like a dumbass and flash your cash around.
Ah,
Got it. But what about scams? I've heard horror stories about tourists getting ripped off in Beijing.
unfortunately, scams are a reality in any tourist destination.
Yeah.
There are always people looking to take advantage of those who don't know the ropes, especially those who don't speak the language.
So what kind of scams are we talking about? Like fake souvenirs and overpriced taxis?
Those are classics, but there are also more elaborate scams, like the infamous tea house scam.
Oh, really? You get lured into a tea house and end up with a bill that could bankrupt a small country.
Damn, that's fucked up. So how do I avoid getting scammed? Should I just stay holed up in my hotel room and order room service?
Don't be paranoid. Just be aware of your surroundings. Do your research before you go. And don't be afraid to say no if something seems shady.
Right. Trust my gut. Okay, so we've covered pollution crime and scams. What other dark secrets does Beijing have? Is there anything really messed up?
One issue that's been getting a lot of attention lately is the government surveillance system. Beijing is one of the most surveilled cities in the world with cameras everywhere and facial recognition technology tracking people's every move.
Whoa, Big Brother is watching. Huh, that's some dystopian shit right there. It makes you think twice about picking your nose in public.
It's definitely a controversial issue. The government claims the surveillance is necessary for public safety, but others see it as a major invasion of privacy. Yeah, I can see both sides. On one hand, it's good to feel safe, but on the other hand, I don't want the government knowing what kind of porn I watch. It's a tough balance.
Oh.
Okay, so surveillance is a big issue. What else? Is there anything else particularly controversial or disturbing about Beijing?
Another thing that worries some people is the city's rapid development. Beijing is constantly changing, with old neighborhoods being demolished to make way for new skyscrapers and shopping malls. Some people feel like the city is losing its soul, its unique character.
Yeah, I get that progress is cool and all, but you don't want to pave over your history and culture completely. It's like replacing a beautiful old tree with a plastic replica.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance between preserving the past and embracing the future.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the surprisingly improving air quality to the ever-present surveillance cameras. It seems like Beijing is a city of contradictions, a blend of ancient and modern, of progress and tradition, of light and darkness. So what's the takeaway here? What should our listeners remember about Beijing?
I think the most important thing to remember is that Beijing is a complex and multifaceted city. It's not perfect, but it's full of surprises. It's a city that's constantly evolving and definitely worth experiencing firsthand.
Well said. Beijing is a city that will challenge your assumptions, expand your horizons, make you think, feel, and maybe even question everything you thought you knew.
It's a city that will stay with you long after you've left.
Damn right. So there you have it, folks. Beijing in all its glory and grit. It's a city that will kick your ass and steal your heart sometimes at the same time.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Beijing.
Yeah, time to tap out. But listen, our journey doesn't end here. Beijing is so massive and insane, we could talk about it for days, but we got to move on new cities to conquer new adventures to be had. So until next time, you beautiful bastards, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning everything. And if you ever find yourself in Beijing, hit us up. We'll point you to the best Peking duck in town and maybe even share some of the city's best kept secrets.
Stay curious, motherfuckers.
Peace out.